Wow. You know what? It is week 13. I'm scrolling down through here. It is week 13 in the semester. And I don't know if I always appreciate your replies to my post. Some of you just say thanks, that was helpful. Makes me wonder if you watched it or not. So, you know, and one of the replies I got just for next week's, like, remember, I'm 2 weeks ahead of you, was like, these attendance posts don't have enough weight for me to, make it something I'm going to do. And that's a really solid comment. Like, because it's only worth 1 point, which, by the way, it's not worth 1 point in your overall grade. It's just a way that I do attendance. Remember, I have to report attendance to the campus. So that's a really good point, is maybe I need to give it a more weight in my overall grading. So I've thought about this, and in my other advanced classes, I've made a change. So I'm going to make a change here as well. Because each week, your reply, I put it at the very top, start here, right? And some of you just go right into the work because, as that student told me, maybe it doesn't hold enough weight. So here's the additional thing I'm going to give you. If you don't get the work done for week 13, of course, as I've been saying, you can submit it late for a 25% reduction in the score, for whatever that score possibility is, right? For my IT lab, it's different. For discussions, which I graded this morning, and, that will be a 25% of the overall points will be reduced for submitting them late. But what I'm going to say for week 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, not 18, because 18 is the end. But for those weeks going forward, if you do attendance, but you don't do all the work and you do the work after the due date, I'm going to cut the 25% in half. And here's the reason: at least you were checking in with the class. And hopefully these videos help you do better at the items this week. So that's my goal. So I'm only going to mention it this week, right? And if you're paying attention, good for you, because it'll help you going forward. But here's the reality too, is that many students who are paying attention are actually passing. It's the students that aren't checking in at all that are really the ones that are not doing well. But kind of switching the gears a little bit, this week, the topics about databases and information systems is really something that if you start to think about, right? I'm going to make this a little bigger just so we can cover the whole screen. So if you start thinking about understanding, if you run a business, and that's the first one, right? So if you run a business, think about the data that you would need to run that business better. I mean, of course, the amount of sales that you have per day, per quarter, per month, per quarter, but as importantly is the amount of expenses that you have, right? Amount of overhead that no matter some expenses vary, some would just stay the same. We call that fixed overhead. Understanding really what is your profit, how much are you making? This is all data that understanding how to get it, where to get it, how to analyze it. These is such, I just think for you all who are coming into maybe various levels of understanding business, because this may not be your major, it's going to affect you, right? Understanding the importance of data can't be overstated. And then the other two I really like as well, open data. It's like there's a lot of data that's just accessible. And I think it's actually almost too much, but it's really an understanding of that. And so this week's discussion is going to focus on two ways to get data to maybe help you pick a class in the future or understand when you're going into that class, like how many students pass that class, how many students take that class, right? So, and I'm getting I'm curious actually of the course content that we provide, meaning, and in this case, it's generally videos, right? How many of you actually watch that stuff? That would be data that I would want to know. And the way this course is set up, I don't have a great way to tell me how long you're spending in that area, but that would be something I'd want to know, right? Because, and I know that students don't do optional. I totally get that. I don't do optional, so I don't know why I would expect you to. But in this case, these are things to help you understand the discussion. So it leads you to do a better job on the discussion. And what I'm looking for in your writing is how well can you first be exposed to analyze the data that we're giving you, the information. By the way, there's a difference between data and information. Data is the raw facts. The information is a summarized piece of data, like all the sales for, let's go back to the business example, all those sales, different products, that's data. But the amount of breakdown of where that daily sales, like how many items, make up like a percentage of your sales, 50%, let's say, those are probably your bigger sellers. That's information, right? And having access to good information can change your life, but also understanding where the data is coming from. What is the data that we're using to talk about these things? So in this case, the discussion board is actually going to focus a little more internally here, because we're going to have you give a look at, and by the way, the video here from Brian is really, really good. And I recommend watching it because it'll help you understand the topics that we're talking about this week, right? And so read through read through this content. And here's the FCC institutional research. And here's a website called Rate My Professor. And I'm kind of curious, have you used that? But that's not the discussion, right? So once you've done the research, make a post telling the class what you've learned, right? So that's the idea. And I'll say this again, right? So just hitting a bullet point 1 and answering at a bullet point 2 is not the idea. The idea, and you're going to hear this from me because I've said it probably a total of 4 times, is to write a narrative, which means taking this information that you've digested, what did you learn, right? And then maybe compare 2 classes, right? Because I actually looked at this class and I realized that my concern about the number of students passing was not as far off as I thought when I look at all of the classes, but that's actually something I want to do better than. I want to have my classes perform well for them, really for you. And of course, because we want you, as a campus, we want you to do well and to succeed. So here's the deal, right? To get full points, right, you need to write at least 1 solid paragraph here, right? And at least 1 substantive reply. And do that, right? If you want full points for this discussion, that's what you need to do. This video from Brian will really help you understand the concepts here, how to read that data that's on that FCC institutional research. You might be surprised. I suspect you will all look up either this class or some other class, or possibly some class next semester, because we're already at the place where you can start thinking about next semester. In addition, last week, I actually promoted some of my classes. You could look at those, right? And then you could also look at Rate Your Professor to see how well those instructors that you're looking at. You could look at me as well to see what students have said about my classes. Totally understandable to do that, right? Or he gives you an example of one, but you get to choose which classes you want to think about here. But more importantly, the idea of this assignment is actually to help you reflect upon the idea of the data that's out there to help you make good decisions, right? Now, this is just an example, and there could be many ways we give you in life. There's so much data coming at you in order to help you make good decisions, but sometimes I actually think we're overloaded with data and not enough good quality information. But part of that is learning to have discernment and learning to be able to read the data that you have access to. Okay? So that's the discussion this week. We continue this week with our um, access. This is what we have here, chapter quiz, of course, and then the Microsoft Access. So this is the last week that you will have an assignment related to the My IT Lab for Access. Okay, and then next week, you should be used to this, will be your, and I believe this is your last lab test for this class, which will be Access Lab Test. And I'll say it one more time, because I've said it a couple. For those of you using Mac, you need to go back and look at how to install Windows inside your Mac to actually install Microsoft Access, because in next week, week 14, you're actually going to need Microsoft Access. So just another heads up about that. I hope you all have a great week. I hope you really do take the time here to consider data that you have access to that directly affects your life in relationship to the classes that you take. And I get it that some of the times you may say, well, I don't really have a choice. I have to take that class. Sure that, right? There's no doubt that there is definitely some truth in that. But having an understanding of the data that you have access to, right, is really the point of this assignment. It's like, okay, you have institutional data and you have rate your professor. How could you use those, right, to maybe look at the instructor's teaching and make some better decisions, right? Or look at understanding, right, how many students are enrolling in those classes, how many are passing, what's the retention rate on those things, right? So this is a simulation, and either just having you walk through and understand the data or actually helping you make decisions. So check that out. I hope you enjoy it. Do remember, if you don't do a substantive reply, just hitting reply and going, yeah, that's good data, or that's good at writing, is not a substantive reply and will not give you the full 25 points. So I give each reply. One reply is required. If you do more than one, then I look at them collectively and see how well you've done. Okay? All right, week 13. Have a wonderful week. Talk to you soon.